We are the Iron Disciples. In this podcast, we talk about bodybuilding, dating, finances, with the goal of being a better man, son, brother, husband, and father, with the focus of building strong families, exploring these topics from a biblical standpoint, how to do these things as Christian men. Hello.
Welcome back. What's so funny?
I was laughing because I kind of cut Joe off when he was doing the intro, so I was like, this is my goofiness coming in.
Well,
I just laugh about dumb stuff like that. It sticks with me for a minute until it's done, and then I'll be like,
do we need to give you a minute?
Yeah, I think I'm going to
Should we just start over
out.
for the
This
everyone?
is not a podcast for laughing.
No,
it's like,
about
what
to
is
say
happening?
that.
Oh, my God.
Frame. All right.
yeah.
So what are we talking about today? We're talking about the recent news that everyone's talking about, the Roe V Wade decision from the Supreme Court. And I guess we're just going to try to give the audience our views on it. And
Whatever that's worth.
Whatever it's worth. It's everyone's talking about it. I think it's like I would say a victory for the church, like probably the biggest in the modern era.
I agree.
Everyone's, the pro-life movement has been just trying so hard for years to make any ground, and I'd say go backwards most time. And here we are with like something I would have never dreamt that happened. And
When did the
I know,
Wade
and under
Roe?
Biden, too. It's weird, kind of weird.
Yeah,
It's
that is
such
a bit ironic.
It is.
What year did the Roe versus Wade? It was in the 70s, right?
1970.
So it's been
Yeah.
going on for a long time.
Yeah, and it's held precedent like for a long time, and I think actual law scholars are usually like, it's not like law, like from a legal decision, objectively, it's not a good decision. And but it's just held precedent, and that's usually what they try to say. It's held up under these circumstances, so you don't overturn precedent. Well, they did.
They did.
They did.
And I know at Bible study, we prayed for it. Scott brought it up. I was looking on some of the, Instagram pages that I follow, a lot of the Christian brothers and sisters and their different groups. They were all praying a lot, and I saw us get together, and we all felt like we were unified in the prayer and the desire for God to do what he needed to do. And I had seen some of the talk about Moloch, the old god Moloch, I believe the Babylonian, Canaanite, several groups of people worshipped and would give their sons and daughters up to this god as a form of sacrifice. And I saw that as well thrown around as a modern day Moloch, as of giving up our kids. And
I don't know if that's exactly true. I mean, because they did it with the intention to sacrifice their kids. This is more like people don't want to have kids.
Yeah.
It's sacrificing something they care deeply about.
I don't think
versus something that they're just kind of devaluing really what it is to have sex, number one, which is I think the real like critical issue. It's like, what are you doing? Have sex? Because it's interesting, like within the contraceptives too. There were so many different contraceptives available today. Why do we even need abortions at this point? It's like, if you don't want to have a baby, you can be on birth control, you can use condoms, there's so many other alternatives.
a sign of huge carelessness.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like you give people more and more tools to safeguard them against something, and they end up giving less and less attention and respect to it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that if you don't want to have a kid, just by exercise, and I don't really think a lot of the contraceptives out there for women are all that great. Dealing with their
Hormones,
hormones
it's pretty bad.
and all those things. I mean, if I was in a woman's shoes, I'd say no to pretty much all of them. Besides, like condom use and stuff like that.
Which condoms suck.
No doubt.
Yeah, they
so
suck.
there's no way, and I think that that's all indicative of the fact that
they
sex,
suck in terms of having sex, like as a male.
They're not great.
And I'm sure as a female, it's not as pleasurable as skin on skin, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to. It's not an argument worth having, but I think that that's all indicative of the fact that sex is not something you can treat frivolously. It has huge implications, and you cannot write them off. Even if you have taken the pill, if you've ever been with a woman that's taken the pill, her hormones are not doing well. It's not good for her to be on the pill. That's my opinion. But as a little digression here. I did look into the Molech thing because I didn't know how it was. It's nice when people. I feel like everybody's like it becomes a slogan, and then everybody kind of jumps on the bandwagon. But I did a little bit of research on it, and I think that the devil's content for you. He doesn't care if you're truly offering your sons and daughters up with that specificity of this is to the god Molech. Yeah, that intent being there. I think he's just happy that you're killing your kids, and I think that the Molech idea, whether it's my idea on demons and old gods and that kind of thing, is that they're actually there. Like the god Molech is a demon, So, is he getting? Is it important for people to know that? I think from a history point of view, it is, because I think that human sacrifice is a very ugly thing, and I think that I think we try to dress it up, as we have a lot of excuses for abortion, like the pro-choice people, and they frequently like to take the word life, baby, embryo, zygote, human. They try and take that out. They'll be like, we're taking the pregnancy out, or they have these vague terms to keep the mind from really being like you're killing somebody.
Well, there's different points within a pregnancy. I mean, there is the zygote, then there's the fetus, and then there's the baby.
Or isn't it embryo?
Embryo zygote, fetus. And there's a heartbeat, and I can understand at some points like what they're getting at in terms of there are different progressions within the assimilation of cells and what they turn into. So,
yeah, and I looked into that too. And one of my favorite apologists, his name's Mike Winger. He did a video that I was able to watch most of today. And then he talked about humans. He's like, well, if you're a 20-year-old man, you're mostly fully developed. You're not into that, decay mode of like 40s or maybe even 36, where things begin to degenerate for you as a human in terms of your body. You look back to an 8-year-old, and that's the same body of cells. They're just growing. So if you take a zygote, it's the same body of cells, the same genetic signature that is present in that zygote. That is present in the 28-year-old man. It just doesn't have the voice. It doesn't have the capacity, the facility of a fully, of a human being that's fully mature.
Well, it doesn't have a consciousness technically. It
yeah,
doesn't have
we
a brain.
protect, and as a species, we protect kids because they don't have frontal lobes. They don't have the decision-making capacity that we as adults do.
They do have frontal lobes.
They're not developed.
They're actually some of the best learning and conscientious beings out there. So
and as for like neuroplasticity, yeah, but their frontal lobes, especially us,
they're not like a zygote.
No, but we protect them because of their lack of, they're not.
Their decision making is much different than an adult.
Much different.
So, Mike, hit us with some data.
Yeah. Some data.
Yeah. So, like, what's going on with these? Who's getting all the abortions? Number one, because we hear about like rape and incest, and those are two that kind of get brought up. But you were telling me that those are the very small portion.
Yeah. So
thankfully.
Yeah. Frankly, yeah. But so to frame it, the argument's always like the exception. Basically, like we need this for the exception to the rule, when the normal use of abortion is frankly just fixing bad reproductive choices. As Rollo would put it, like that's really what it is. It's a Band-Aid problem to a much further problem earlier down the line that we can discuss later. But
we should definitely save that.
Yeah,
it's an important point.
So we'll put this up on the screen. So this is out of just a few states. I think Florida is one of the few. They actually you have to document why the abortion's happening. Most states don't ask questions.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And that's Planned Parenthood. They make.
I think it's just any clinics that are doing them.
Yeah. Okay.
So this shows. This is Florida. Actually, this is 2022. So this is short year. We'll do 2021. So this is all abortion reasons basically, and then at what trimester stage. Throughout the year of 2021. And you can see here that just elective abortion or for social economic reasons, Like those are the high majority. Out of 80,000, we're looking at 75-ish thousand that fall in those two categories. So completely elective, and basically, it's birth control in the end.
So what do you mean by elective?
Like convenience? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I think like a mother or a potential mother, a woman that decides to have an abortion because it's just going to be cumbersome to her life for one reason or another.
Yeah. It's kind of like the catch-all reason, whereas they specifically, as you'll see on the chart there, label out some of the other ones that are more like, the health of the mother's in danger, or there's a genetic deformity they found, stuff like that you can see is called out. And then like the real edge case, well, they usually would say the arguments are usually for incest, rape, and then if the mother's life's in danger. And it's like, we need this available for that. Well, as you can see here, 200 out of 80,000 are for incest and rape. And that's, a fraction of a percent. I think it's like 0.1%. And even with the mother's life in danger, that looks like, no, that one's not endangering the mother.
The defect and
physical
deformity.
Abortion performed due to a life-endangering physical condition?
Yeah.
That's still like way down.
Yeah, it's such a small number that it's not even relevant to the argument, really.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps it's a separate argument. Like, do we allow it for those situations?
Mm-hmm.
If we can get
Right.
the elective part out, I would feel so much better. Like,
No kidding.
stop using it as birth control. Logically, every life's legitimate, whether it's unfortunately created through a rape scenario or not. Like, that's still a human child.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be honest about that. And
That's a
And
really
innocent.
tough one.
It's
It's a really
innocent.
tough one.
Yeah.
That one and incest, I just see that as like, that's in the,
but there's a
the
lot
woman's
of
hands,
I know, but then there's a lot like you got all these stories of people who were born out of that circumstance that are living very fulfilled lives, and it's
Absolutely.
like that person should have been quote by society standards should have been put down essentially, and before not even been able to live, and it's like
It's not that
it's
kid's
just hard
fault.
for the mother because she's got to think about what happened every time she looks at that kid.
well, I think in that case I was talking about with my friend, it would be an adoption case, I think, for sure. Like the mother would have to have like a miraculous.
Most cases,
yeah. I would assume have to have a miraculous change in her mind. Like otherwise, you're going to view that kid, I'm assuming, in a
I don't
terrible
know if
way.
you could. Yeah, that seems so traumatic.
Mhm.
Just the PTSD that she'd go through.
I don't know. I
Seen
mean,
that.
I feel like when I think about like the old days when women would be raped, and they'd have kids, and a lot of those kids were product of rape. When you have
Very much in wartime back in the old
a
days.
lot of them. I mean, I don't even know how many. If you think about the women who were young and able to conceive, like probably every one of them had to have in wartime. We're gonna have a rape baby.
Well,
and
it's
I know
not that
that-
easy to conceive. It's
just
not, you
saying
can't
that
just blow
if
a
it
load
was-
and have a baby. It's
Well,
actually
here's the
kind of-
thing. I'm not saying that it's from rape because you have to take into consideration the life of a woman back in those days. So they would be forced into a marriage or a partnership that they didn't have a say in. And so does that constitute rape? I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, so then they get raped and they pillaged initially, and then they're forced into relationships afterwards with people that were their oppressors.
Right.
war
and they-
brides.
Yeah, war brides. So I think that women, I know that the heart of a woman, and this is just my thoughts, I think that they have this beautiful caretaker, that sense of maternity and care for the kids is one of the strongest impulses in humanity we know. And I don't ever want to underestimate that. I see women like Mother Teresa. I see women like the ones who put aside their lives completely for orphans, men and women who do that. And they find fulfillment in that. So I'd appreciate people saying that the fulfillment can be had. That people can have that people, when they look at an innocent life, they think of the innocent life rather than the trauma that it came from. I'd like to shed light on that and the hope that's there too, because it is an innocent child, that none of us were asked to be born. And I remember that was always something we said when we were ultimately frustrated with our parents or, when we were young. And then at some point you realize, no one did. It's not just you. And so it takes that thoughtfulness on the behalf of the woman to look at that child, the potential for a child. And I think it's just the same way it works with fearsome things. No one wants to look under their bed when they think a monster lives under there. And so a woman who's been raped and has a rape baby in gestation inside of her, to tell her and put her under those severe circumstances, you have an innocent child in you. They don't want to hear it. They're very much, and I understand that. I'm not saying that.
Well, they have things going.
That.
They have protocols. So when someone gets raped now, they go to the hospital. They get rid of that semen. It's done. There's a very rarely do like women.
I mean, you see the numbers. It's so rare.
It's so rare. So I mean, like this is stuff from more like third world countries or where someone gets raped and they literally can't make it to the hospital.
Which is fascinating because I know rape is one of the most under.
Well, that's what he's saying. Is it's really not even much of a discussion because it's like not even a point.
Well, that's not exactly what I was saying.
Weird.
It's the most. A lot of women get raped and they don't say anything about it.
So for the sake of
it's very under.
Oh yeah,
reported.
we're talking about them
use
getting
it-
raped and having babies.
let's
but
use
yeah.
a different term for that. I realize YouTube is not a huge fan of that, the R word.
Really?
Yeah, they always say grape on the other podcast. I remember
Grape?
because it's they will.
Okay, great.
I forgot about that. So
Good
Great.
call, Mike.
There we go.
Let's do some
but-
more statistics.
yeah. So this one I found interesting. So this is a positive in the fact that abortions are declining over the years, pretty significantly.
That's good.
But then it shows it looks like the number of the medical abortions is going up.
What's the difference there? What is?
So I believe those are the ones that they just they can take a pill now,
just
and
kill
rather
Like the
than
day
having to
after
go.
pill or something.
No, I think
That's
it's separate
different,
than. I think if you're before 12 weeks, I think they don't have to do a procedure.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a number of pills.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So that's
It's like a few morning after pill, from what I understand.
The morning
Couple
after
of them.
pill only thickens the mucus, so it doesn't actually kill the embryo or anything.
Mhm. And they
just-
kind of do a number of those, and it just drops the embryo or the zygote.
it's apparently a
whatever it is.
horrible experience.
It's
Yeah.
lots of bleeding.
Yeah.
It's lots of pain. Yeah.
The day after it prevents this. You don't even have the sperm meeting the.
I watched that Unplanned movie that's about that pro-life advocate Abby Johnson. Have you ever heard of her? She was a Planned Parenthood director for
Is
2
she part of the
decades.
Catholic Church? Does
I
she?
don't think so.
No. Okay.
But her story, the movies, you got to watch it. It is powerful. But her story was, she was all, pro-choice, working in the industry for years. And until she got asked, because they were short staff, she wasn't involved in the medical side. She's just an administrator. She got asked to help on a procedure and literally watched on the ultrasound screen this little, baby, trying to avoid the suction cup, or the suction tube.
God,
It was
dude.
such a traumatic experience.
She witnessed a murder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it just flipped her like that. And now she's probably one of the biggest pro-life advocates out there.
God, that's powerful,
And
bro.
but yeah, I almost had to walk. I watched that movie with my sister. I almost had to walk out of the theater. I was just so sick to my stomach watching
It's gnarly.
some of that. And
But that's the boogie monster under the bed. That's what no one wants to see,
no,
and it's the reality of it.
It's the same thing with war, bro.
Same
Bunch
thing
of
with
other
war.
things.
Well, what do they do with war? They
Donkulous.
glamorize it. They make it sound like it's great, and the same thing they did with abortion. They make it an achievement.
Yeah,
they make it
That's
something.
that's weird.
They do
that
that.
is weird.
They've done that with the.
but that's how you normalize it. If it's a moral issue, you have to get past that shame feeling and stuff. So you got to normalize it somehow. And why not just celebrate it? And that's what I feel like they just that's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, you're going to have people feeling, how do you get over that guilt?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other side of it. Like you brought up, as far as Molech and what Satan wants out of it in the end. It's not only is that human life being removed, but that mother is going to be forever haunted in most cases, I think.
Deeply marred by that.
Yeah. And it's really sad.
I remember one of our favorite dudes, Jordan, he talks about Pinocchio. Right? He takes the archetypes apart from that and does a really, really good job.
Maps a meaning, yeah.
And maps a meaning, yeah. And he talks about this one scene where Pinocchio is sitting at I think it's a bar, and he's hanging out with the cat or the fox and the other creature that's there. And the kid that's already pretty far along the process of turning into an ass, like a donkey, he starts braying, and everybody's sort of laughing and
Oh, they're
ignoring
on the
us.
island.
They're on
yeah,
the
they're
island.
hanging out. They're playing pool.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
kinda
and there's like this,
hamming it up.
like we were
Yeah.
talking about. They
Yeah.
turn it to an achievement or like something fun, and you could see in that little scene in that cartoon, they had a lot of noise, a lot of fun games, a lot of things to distract Pinocchio from seeing his buddy turn into a donkey, and then eventually he did too. But you're right, Mike. It's a tack that they use to
Spin.
normalize. Yeah, it's the spin. And they have to use fun stuff. They have to turn it into the exact opposite of what it is.
Yeah, it reminds me of 1984. I'm
Yeah.
reading that right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild.
Well, so many things in society have done that too, because it's not just that. Like, we could probably, well, before we go into that,
Yeah, let's do some more statistics.
so
Mike.
this one is interesting. I don't like how they label the numbers here. So it's income levels, basically or abortion rates by income groups, and they have it like I think it's based off like poverty. So then it's like 300% over poverty, etc. But
okay.
it just kind of shows the correlation, and I think
Whoa.
the video I sent you guys earlier, it said, bear with us on the, I don't know, if we can't say 100% certain, but it was $47,000 a year. Single women earning $47,000 a year abort about 32% of their babies, and like it kind of shows almost what you would intuitively think is opposite. I figured
Yes.
the lower income people would be having the majority of abortions, and it seems like it scales with income more so. And it's kind of like
That is so.
which
I would've
makes
never
it
thought that.
yeah, which makes it even kind of more stomach churning, just in the fact that because that really shows it's elective, and it's like careers and stuff are getting chosen over a human life,
Yeah.
which is very, very sad.
How are they doing this? They going out like Saturday night and like having a couple drinks and then just riding raw and just having babies? Like,
I
are
don't-
they not
that's
like
what-
having
that's
like
my
what's
question.
going
I'm like,
on there?
how
dude?
much has society degenerated? Because if you just
Well,
look
it's like-
at
yeah.
if you look at number one, we have insane single parent household rates right now.
Yeah.
And so that's just gone up. But at the same time, birth rates have gone down. We're at the lowest birth rates ever. So the actual volume of kids being had is super low. And thus, that's why you also probably see the abortion rates are actually going down. That's probably correlated. And then marriage rates are also at all-time low. So even with super low birth rates and abortion and all these contraceptives, there's still such an insane amount of single-parent households. So it's like, how is this happening? Like,
Yes, they don't want to have a kid. Yeah, they don't.
Is everyone just like sleeping with everyone now? Is that all?
Obviously.
And they
Yeah.
don't. There's no
Yeah.
families, like we've been
Yeah.
saying. It's just like they, and that's when you would feel like you could confidently raise a kid.
I just have so much of a heart for those single because I mean, when I hear these statistics and I see this lay of the land, it seems like the people who are having babies, they want them. They're like the good people that are like, I'm gonna keep this, and they do it in spite of not having a family. Do it because there's single moms out there who are like, you know what, I'm gonna have this baby, and God bless the strength in those single moms' hearts, man. God bless them for saying,
and fathers.
and the fathers, yeah, of course,
couple of them out there.
Of course, and you know what? I can imagine a couple fathers who are like, please have this baby, I'll take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a relationship, but I'll take it. And God bless those people, because
That's another interesting point.
Well, and I saw Patrick Bet David posted, America leads the world in single parent households, apparently, as far as the
Because we have
percentage.
so much abundance. Because you can
Yeah.
actually have a single household,
Yeah.
or a single person
And survive
providing
pretty good.
Nowhere else.
And that's
gonna
what
happen.
Rolo was talking about, is a lot of these women today are just having kids on their own because they can handle it.
Yes.
These older women that are like, mid-30s, and they can just go for it and really not have to need that guy involved.
Did you watch the Boy Crisis
Podcast
with Jordan?
I watched like half of that
was
one.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he goes into depth about, like, you brought up the shooting that happened in Texas, and all the mass shootings are guys. You don't see girls going out with guns and killing a bunch of people.
Mhm.
And he correlates that directly to the lack of fathers in households and the lack of the discipline, what a father brings to a family, and how that makes proper young men and women too. He also talks about how the girls need that as well. But men have been so curbed in the household where the discipline and the structure that a man brings has been seen as like abuse to a lot of people.
Because, didn't he say even the households with the father in him, the father is so curbed and have to be kind of passive.
He finds his validation within being a provider. So he's like, oh, I'm going to get, whenever he tries to discipline or something like that, he'll get curbed. And then he'll get adulated for bringing home bacon. So he'll just go out and work, but he's not at home. So even with the families that do have fathers, they're not even at home. They're not being fathers. You know, they're not able to guide.
Yeah, I appreciated that. I listened to it, and I immediately sent it to you guys because I feel like that issue of fatherhood and celebrating the father's purpose and how that ties into developing a complete human being it's the path. It's a psychological pathogen, just like all these things that have been promulgated through our Western world in the form of thought and philosophy, that if you discipline a child, you're abusing him.
Right.
And it's so messed up. Jordan tells this story of his kid. I guess his son was pretty tough to manage when he was young, like a toddler. So he'd come home and they get a report from the babysitter and be like, "Yeah, he's having
he
issues."
Went to school. He would go to daycare, learn a bunch of BS from all the kids there, and he'd bring it home, and then he'd test them both on it.
Right, but they'd also get reports, that his kid was, because he'd
acting up
with
the
kids,
guys,
yeah,
and then they watched him like a hawk.
Right, so that was the part that I really appreciate. Jordan said, "My wife and I paid attention to the son to make sure that he knew that the eyes were on him, and what he had witnessed in his son was, instead of the response getting turned into this anxiety thing for his son, like people would say, this is abuse, you're destroying your child,
micromanaging
him. It turned into his son having relief, knowing where the boundaries were and being able to function and be himself within those boundaries. And he described kids pushing the boundaries, and it causes them anxiety when they don't know where the boundaries are, because they keep pushing and pushing, and it seems like chaos to them. So they want to get a response from the people that are in control. And so when you turn that into abuse, you have more chaos, you have more mental illness, and that's the issue within the United States, is mental illness. And you look at the kids who are shooting up the schools, they're mentally ill. That's not a gun control problem.
They want recognition. They want to be defined. He brought up to one kid
that read his book, right? And stopped it.
Yeah. Oh, that was powerful.
Yeah,
and wrote him an email and said, "Hey, you changed."
What a smart kid, by the way. Can you imagine being that reflective on your own situation?
Yeah,
at that age,
and he
was
about
recognized.
Yeah,
because that's what he said. He's like, I felt like you actually knew me, like you recognized my story from reading your book, and that's all I was wanting.
And he was actually he was in a faction where he was writing, he was a smart kid. You could tell he was a part of a faction, a fascist thing.
Yeah.
And he was writing up a
52-page or something
of what he was going to do and carry out some heinous crime, it sounded like.
It was a mass shooting.
A mass shooting, but you can tell the mental illness behind there, because he's getting his recognition through violence. He's getting his recognition through hurting other people when they're innocent people. They're not people who've done anything to him, But that sense of affliction is so deep that everybody is afflicting them. Their eyes don't differentiate innocent from antagonist anymore,
Right.
And that's where the father can say, "Hey, I'm antagonizing you. I'm showing you where the boundaries are, and you're going to love me for it." Just like God says, "I admonish those I love."
Right.
And I know this is a bit of a,
Well, it kind of falls in line
it,
because I think, we're talking about abortions and why they're happening.
Yeah. Well, the single family households, right? There's a lot of those going on. So
I suppose we should too talk a bit what does this decision actually mean for the country? Because I think a lot of people viewed Roe V Wade goes away, abortion's illegal across the country, and it really is not, and it doesn't probably change a whole lot. So just to give like a basic overview, that decision just allows the states to now make a decision.
Good, Mike. Yeah.
And so, each state now can legislate how they want to on abortion. Now, I think 13 states already had legislation in place that if that ever got struck down, it immediately becomes illegal. So, like I saw in where I'm from, Fargo, North Dakota, they had a clinic there already they raised a ton of money to move their clinic literally across the river to the Minnesota side because it's immediately illegal in North Dakota now.
Wow.
So states get to decide that. So the blue states, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And that's what's funny, because that's where all these big protests are happening and like riots, basically. It's like nothing's going to change for you there.
But I think that's part of our democracy and our republic, and I think that's a good move, because not every state should be carpeted, blanketed the same laws.
Exactly.
So I think that's good in the long run. That's the way they did it.
It's just going to cause more separation, I think, because more and more of these political issues, people are just voting with their feet now. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see
voting with their feet,
voting with their residency,
their feet. Yeah, that's a good point. I do think the human rights issue is something that when the blue states go for their, when you hear their slogans and things, it's very much human rights. For the LGBTQ or whatever. The gun laws, it's always human rights. You hear a lot of that. And it just blows my mind that they're the ones who are pro-choice when you think about what human rights are. And the most innocent, defenseless human being that you could find in the planet is the one that because they conflate things. They conflate woman's rights. You have a right for your body, but there's another life.
You don't have a right when it's involving vaccines, though, it seems like.
Right. You don't. You just don't. And that's there's this sometimes it makes me chuckle, and it's not, and it's because I'm sort of fed up, and a little bit tired of it.
I think it's always been that way, and we have these blind eyes to things, and we have these double
standards. It's a bit ridiculous.
Standards.
There's a bit of buffoonery going on there when you think about their logic, and when it's okay and when it's not.
Well, and that's, we could probably get into some of the base arguments that get thrown from the pro-choice people, because I frankly love to have these debates. Like, if someone wants to come at me with it, I'm just ready, because I have heard it all.
Let's go.
And because
come on, Mike.
You really don't need. Like, I've seen more and more non-religious people be pro-choice. Or, I mean, pro-life, which is because you don't need to take out biblical principles to actually even be pro-life
or religious, Muslim, or anything.
Yeah, because obviously the Bible has got some very obvious reasons to be pro-life, but you don't just some of the logical stuff that doesn't make sense. Like, for example, if you I think state by state the laws are different, but if you were to murder a pregnant woman, you're gonna have a double homicide.
Oh yeah,
I heard that.
And if if you're conflating that child in her womb as a human that would warrant that, how in the world is
how's the flip side?
How's the flip side of the woman just making a decision to abort it? Okay, there's a lot of these double standards that make no sense. It's that literally means the human rights of that child are dependent on an opinion of the mother in that moment. Her opinion could change one day, and now all of a sudden that baby has rights. One day it doesn't, and it's there's no lot that doesn't make any sense. Come on,
how do you?
How?
It doesn't make any sense.
Hold any water.
And then
hurts my brain to think of that.
Yeah, and then the other part of it is, where's the line? And usually pro-choice people do have some arbitrary line in the sand of when it's too far along. Yeah. And that you can't make it in law needs to be objective, and that is such a arbitrary thing. This many weeks it matters, or this many weeks, and it's in the end, if you view the baby within the womb as not having human rights, you got to allow it all the way up to birth. Tell me why not? Why is this arbitrary heartbeat, or it's got to have brain activity, or all these lines in the sand that are very subjective and
just seems like if they want it, it's a kid.
Yeah.
And then they don't, it's a zygote. Or
it's just exactly. Because you got plenty of people that are fine with it up to birth, and to me, that's logically consistent. Versus some arbitrary no 12 weeks or 14 weeks or 18. Like, come on.
I mean, bottom line is the DNA is a signature of that human being.
Yeah, it's a separate. Yeah.
Like, how can you change? It's not changing. It's the signature of your humanity and the uniqueness that you are.
What is a living being? What defines something that's
I remember in
living?
biology, they say movement is living. So then a cell is living. If that's a part of you, it's like really what constitutes a human being. You know, like if I cut my arm off and, you know, like it doesn't make sense.
Also, a lot of the arguments they would use, you could apply to end of life too.
Well, it's
so like if
sentience.
there's no brain activity, let's say they'll be
Right.
like, there's no brain activity yet. It's non-human life.
It's like
But
that sentience.
That
is
means
right?
does somebody who got in a car accident, lost brain activity, is now no longer a human being as far as rights? Like,
right.
there's a whole bunch of different scenarios you
And
can
how
apply
do
that.
we, like, personally, I think that there's sentience. I don't know if that's the right word because it's ability to think and, you know, sort of have that. But if you have somebody with brain damage that's so bad and then they're, you know, carrying on in a coma or whatever, I think everybody has that. Because life in biology, they say it's movement. You know, they have this little explanation for life. But that's not the question we're really answering, right? When you have somebody who's a vegetable, we know that person's life force is not present anymore. You know, it's like a cadaver that's somehow carrying on. Like a zygote hasn't had the opportunity, and we can't even really judge that because it's like we respond to life and that the spirituality or that life force of a human, depending on what they're putting out. You know, like, are they speaking? Are they responding? Right? There's all these. How do you test that on a zygote? Well, it's just not at that point.
It's brain activity,
right? It's like
consciousness,
right? So.
I'd view it as irrelevant too.
Well, I mean, half these people wouldn't be alive. Let's be real. Like, you know,
well, I think
you have a heart attack. You're dead 200 years ago. There's no triple bypasses available. You get cancer. There's no cancer treatments for you. There's a lot of these diseases that we allow people to live way past their so-called due date.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember this movie, Jack Kevorkian or something. He was like a euthanasia guy.
Oh, yeah.
For terminal patients, and he got a lot of, I think he went to prison or something. I forget exactly the story, but he was championing the person's right if they are terminally ill and they're going through like a bunch of pain or whatever to say, I want to cut the cord on this. And it just made me think, like, you're talking about brain dead or someone who was on life support. You know, are they? Yeah, this.
Do they lose human rights?
Do they lose human rights because they have no consciousness? You know, because then you're going down the zygote thing. There's
Well, that's
no
what I
brain,
was
there's no parafrontal lobe, there's nothing going on with those. It's a DNA signature, but there's no consciousness involved.
I was going to finish my thought on that because I was just trying to talk about both those scenarios where you have like a zygote, right? We can't really test the sentience or is there consciousness or the spiritual life force, is it there? Versus a vegetable where somebody did have it and we did test it and then we know that it's not there. I think that's a pretty... we all started as a zygote. So that's typical for human beings, is to start without a ability to measure life force. So we have to assume that it's there.
And
end up having
we know for a fact the potential for it to be there.
Exactly. So it's a lot different than a vegetable, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's like even if you can say like this 10-week-old baby in the womb is completely absent of anything we would consider like life, what that is a potential human being.
Exactly, and
like,
we have to.
You could also say it for miracles for those people. Like sometimes people they come out of comas after 10 years.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And then they're like, "Thank God you didn't pull the plug on me, bro." Like this happens too. So
those tough, and that's the thing. If you're a vegetable, those laws involved with keeping them alive and what is that called? Where the
do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate. Yep. And then the person gets the whoever's their caretaker or first in line to whatever its signature, they choose on behalf of the person. It's all very, very difficult stuff, because you're making a serious decision on somebody's life. But we all can acknowledge miracles happen. Like Joe said, there's medical marvels that occur every day. If I was in that situation, say, what would I want to be done? That's what you have to ask yourself.
Yeah,
Well,
you can't even think about it. Like
It's pretty wild. I
No,
know.
I mean, like if somebody's, on your driver's license, like if you're an organ donor, if they put you in, again, it's the boogie monster under your bed. It's easy to judge it standing outside
dead,
your
liver.
room. But it's like, hey, John, do you want to, if you were, diagnosed as a vegetable and there's no brain activity and this and that, would you just want the plug to be pulled? I would take me a minute to think about that. I don't know
Or
if I
if
could
you
just
were-
answer that really
that's a tough
quickly.
Something I would like to bring up because I feel like is technology. A lot of these choices wouldn't be available without technology. They did have abortions. Abortion's been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
the
it was
Egyptians
terrible.
been doing it.
ways.
They have,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
didn't
and
know
it
that.
wasn't always as terrible as you think. They actually had certain concoctions that the herbal that worked pretty darn good. I'm sure they didn't have as many abortions as we're having now. That being said, I'm sure that did not occur, and I'd say it was only for like really rich people that didn't want to have babies.
The statistics,
But
it
it has been going on for a long time, and I forget when the Egyptians, they had it in some papyrus, and they had a whole recipe for it, pretty much. So it's been going down for a long time, but the frequency, and also we're talking about these health, like people that are medically being saved beyond their due date with all the advancements that we have, it beckons the question, like, we have all these people's lives that are being saved, but then we have all this death that's happening as well. It's kind of like that double-edged sword that's occurring right now. And like, it's just interesting to think about,
So
we're
if you
saving a
want the
bunch of
life or
lives.
you
but
don't
then-
want the life. I feel like the human rights is directly connected to how people feel about the life in question.
Well,
like
and
the
the
lives in
volume.
Africa clearly aren't as important as the lives in the United States. People get murdered there. There's all kinds of issues with health and disease that could be remedied if, no one cares that much. They don't care that much. You could circulate articles about, atrocities in Africa every day in your paper, and people get sick of it. They just throw the paper in the garbage because they know what's happening, but they don't care. So it's like, how do they feel about the human life that's in question?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
just look
that's
at the volume.
That's a rough one because we all say human rights. Like, I believe every human right is equal, but when we really take ourselves to task, we prefer certain humans more than others, and these guys get more treatment than others, And
Part of that's just being removed from situations too. We're always the stuff you see. That's why like data doesn't sway people's emotions. Like
It
one
doesn't.
story on this TV screen of some little child being saved or whatever is going to sway everyone way more than data showing that this is obvious.
Why is that?
Well, that's a problem with politics. That's a problem with our world today. Is there's just way too much drama, melodrama, and emotion going on behind the decisions that need to be made. And when Joe Rogan says, like, I think we should have a supercomputer making half of these decisions, I totally agree with him because, like, we should be inputting data because we have the data, and then there should be mathematical conclusions made based upon that data instead of like
Problem is
this garbage that's going on with the
a
media.
human has to program the supercomputer.
Well, and there should be a council that goes over the decisions. It shouldn't just be piped out and done, But I think there's something mathematical that's precious to making certain decisions when it comes down to environment or, quality of living and resources. It's like this stuff is pretty much mathematical at the end of the day,
I agree. I think that
abortions are a trickier subject because I think it comes down to like sex. And how people view sex. And like we were just talking about how many contraceptives are available. Yes, they're not. I wouldn't want my woman on birth control.
I wanted to bring something up.
But there's other ways to, I wanted to say there's other ways besides birth control. Being a male, guys, you can control your sperm. All right. It's not like some freaking fire hose. All right. There's a lot of things you can do. There's the Tao. There's the Tao of Sex. I got a book on this. I forgot how old I was.
Or just abstinence.
Abstinence is a good thing, but let's be real. Even if you are going to be married and say you want to have sex with your wife, but you don't want to have kids for the next year or two, you're not going to stay abstinent. You're gonna. There should be a way you guys can have sex and enjoy each other.
But I think that's also the edge case of people probably
Well,
having
there's
this problem.
It's absolutely
well, the
an edge
idea
case,
is that
100%.
a lot of guys, I think, aren't educated properly
I
on how to
agree.
use what their tools. Okay, they just think it explodes and that's it. That's not the way it works. You can absolutely there's muscles down there. It's an open close valve, and you don't just explode every time. So guys, if they took it more seriously, besides just putting all the effort or the responsibility on women,
Oh,
because
100%.
the women
agree.
get this responsibility that's like, oh, it's her, but no, it's you, dude. That's your sperm. That's your seed.
Well, I think that's
you don't just
no one's
spray
taking
that seed out
responsibility because they
willy-nilly.
have the fail-safe valve of abortion. They're like, I'm not going to take my birth control like I'm supposed to because of that, or the guy's not going to put effort into it because it's like, well, you can just go fix this problem with a couple pills later.
It's not that easy though. It's brutal. Like it's a lot of bleeding. Like it's a lot of it's a you're not going to work.
But they don't get told that, so that's how I think they view it until they go through it once, and then all of a sudden they're going to change their actions.
Yeah, I think. But Joe brings up a valid point: is that you can have you can have the sexual pleasure, you can have the orgasmic moment, and be more responsible. And I think that is really the overarching situation. And I wanted to bring up an issue about technology, and so we'll get to that. But the overarching issue is that sex is not being handled with respect. And then life, which is the real purpose in sex, is to progenitor to make more of us, is not being handled with respect. And then from there, the respect of people diminishes, and you have this cascading effect where human rights end up being completely destroyed. That's what I see. And it ties into technology, which is a really good point you brought up, Joe. In the Old Testament, there's not very much information on it, but there's several falls that occur for humanity. You have the first fall, right? Adam and Eve, they eat of the fruit, and then you have the second fall. You have Noah, he starts over again. And you have the third fall, the Tower of Babel, and each time more is taken from man. What's going on there is technology. And you can say technology, when we think of it, we think of computers. We think of electronics. This is the day and age of technology we relate to. Back in those days, the technology they had was building things, the alchemy of taking metals out of rocks, medicines, navigation with the stars. And this technology would bring humans to a place that they didn't have, or they felt they didn't depend on God anymore, do things in their own way, and then God would have to humble them, right? And it caused perversion of the appetites, is what it always did every time. There's a couple of books, mainly the Book of Enoch. It is not scripture by any means, but there's some very interesting things in that book that describe technology and the way that it changed people. So I'll go into a very brief summary of what went on there. So the children of men were taught by these angels, Nephilim, fallen angels, how to build things, how to take metal and do things with metal, how to build monolithic things, medicines, magic, stuff like that. When you think about Pharaoh's men, his wizards going against Moses, they learned those things from somewhere. So in the Book of Enoch, allegedly, they were taught by these fallen angels, Nephilim, right? And so they built big cities, right? And then they had to be wiped away. Like, it never rained before Noah, so they wiped away. The Tower of Babel, you see the technology right there. They're building a huge tower. That's the technology of building. So the technology I see now is like pornography is absolutely a form of technology. Although the term doesn't fit as precisely as I'd like it, it definitely is. You're getting a high-resolution representation of sex that's perverted, that creates a perverted desire in you, that destroys what sex is for, making kids, and ultimately destroys humanity's the human rights, the value that humans are, starts to come under that disintegrate, it disintegrates. It starts to fall apart because of the way that technology is used. And so I think it's interesting the Bible talks and warns us of that kind of stuff. Like,
Well,
it's not to say...
it comes down to consequences, because if you get rid of consequences for people, they're more likely to less respect the action itself. So that's like we're talking about fathers and kids. Like, the fathers are taken out, subtracted from the household. There's no consequences. These kids end up finding consequences through shooting up a school and murdering a bunch of children, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for boundaries. They're looking for... So the technology... Yeah, it gets rid of a lot of these consequences, or it makes the consequences less. Like, you can go out and look at porn and not have a girl.
But it's not...
And you can get all different kinds of porn.
But it compounds it, actually.
Yeah,
It doesn't get rid of it.
No, it makes it worse. More and more depraved. So I think consequences are super important.
Absolutely.
And pain and suffering are part of keeping us in line as human beings. And the more we try to get rid of that stuff, the more and more we're going to have a weak, indecisive, disrespectful to the nature that humans have inherently. And whether you believe in God or not doesn't really apply to that.
Well,
it's in our nature at that point in time, and you are disregarding that based upon a route that technology provides you or the people around you. So it's an option, and it's given out as an easy way or as a productive way of living, which it's not.
It's not.
A lot of times
it's a subtle form of suicide. And suicide is the ultimate way of saying life is valueless. You know?
Well, just think of like what,
Absolutely.
As far as the technology, the big one is the contraceptive. We haven't had that through all of human history. Like,
Look
just
what
like
it's done.
Jordan Peterson has brought that up, and multiple people, biologists, like how that is a giant fork in the road for humans, is being able to like take control of reproduction in that way. And then that does turn sex from literally reproductive purposes, which is why our brains are wired to strive after it, to completely removing the reproduction part, and now it's only a dopamine hit.
Exactly.
And
Pleasure.
it's like, what's going to be the end result of that for 50, 60 years
It's
of
like you made it
that
easier.
cycle?
Right.
They're eventually
I think the
going
end
to come back to the purpose of it, I believe,
I
and
hope
it'll
so.
flow way out of control, and then eventually it's going to reel it way back in, and people will be like, there's no point in it anymore. Become pointless. You've lost the value in it. It's just like there's no specialness, there's no mystery. It's just junk food at that point in time.
Junk food.
And anyone can get it at any time. So what makes it special is going to end up doing a 180 again, and people are going to be like, oh, it's about having kids,
when you look at
having a family.
the porn stars, I've watched some of these guys who they go out and and there's several that are in the industry for years, and then they become people of faith. They find Christ. And the question that gets presented to them a lot is like, did you like the sex? Was that good? And no one, after it's run like a year or 2 years being in the industry, they say that, especially the female actors, say they want to just be held. They don't want to, and intercourse has nothing to do with their desires. It's the furthest thing away, as a matter of fact, because intimacy is so much different. And that technology of the streaming services, the computer, the internet, that ends up destroying that intimacy you can have with a person. It just shows you that God's purpose in these things is not something that you can commandeer and make your own.
You have to be pre-selective a lot more.
You will suffer for those choices by giving yourself up in a form of subtle suicide. You're destroying a part of yourself. And so that was one of the things that I was trying to find the other night, was like, how do these women feel after they've had abortions? Were you guys able to find anything about that? Like, are there women who deal with maybe even PTSD?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
after
some
having
women that
abortions, they
absolutely
deal with...
Most of them do. But I think that, like Mike was saying, there's this agenda to put a lot of spin on it, make it an achievement where women can feel better about it. But I think that it shows in itself what the women are going through emotionally. It's a very powerful thing. The postpartum depression is huge, and that's for even women that do have kids. That's when they do have a baby. It's like the baby coming out of them can put them in a depression because it's not actually in them. That's how close they felt with them. So that happens with living children that are born naturally. So you can only imagine what happens with the
I just wanted to
aborted
hear
babies.
more of those stories because
Yeah, I haven't heard it. I haven't heard many myself, and I think like there's just the agenda is so strong. Like if the woman is still so adamantly pro-choice after the bias to not admit
true.
that struggle
True.
is going to be so hard. Like I think the ones that flip to pro-life later are the ones that are going to talk about it.
True.
Because it's like how like
That's
I'm
why it's
all
so
about
hard.
being pro-choice, and then I go and have that done, and then I just have this giant cloud over my head forever for the rest of my life. They're not gonna want to talk about that.
No.
I don't think the cloud lasts, though, for some of them. I've heard a lot of women that are later in life, they come around and they're just like, man,
Absolutely.
it hits them like
That's
like
what I was
Jordan
looking
Peterson
for.
says this. He's like, no one gets away with anything. I've never seen anyone get away with anything ever. And he's been a clinical psychologist for a long time.
Mhm.
Probably heard some crazy stuff.
Yeah,
And
you can have somebody who's sitting there and they're saying it doesn't affect me when clearly it's like, look, dude, I can see it affecting
they
you.
compartmentalize.
Like
it. There's
you
a
don't have,
time-
you can't lie your way through your. That's the indelible mark it makes on your personhood,
Yeah.
your spirit. You know,
Like-
that's why I think a lot of the women, that mind, control that happens when you're biased, when you're on the part of a winning team, and you conflate human rights with a single, like there's so much going on there. And it's just taking pause to think, say to yourself, what's actually going on?
I think the women
It
get
doesn't
a lot of-
happen that it does. There's not many times for people to take a break to reflect like that. I do think when they get older, they do.
That's true.
Maybe when they're in their 40s or 50s, they think back to in their 20s and they had their abortion.
That happens with a lot of things.
I think so.
With a lot of
I think so. I
ideologies,
agree.
and
I think
you're in
so.
that from I would even say 15 to
I mean,
25. That 10 years right there. You're so just with hormones. You're filled with hormones. Ideologies, especially extreme ones, are so attractive. And if they're spoken in the right way, you can get swooped right up into that. And, it can, that's why parents are so important. You got to be able to guide your kids because there's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing out there, speaking things that sound good and with good songs and with a bunch of famous people and a whole lot of propaganda and force going behind it that can just take your mind like this. Very fast. And even for people that are logical and pragmatic, it can happen to those people as well. So it's essential. Like John was saying, a lot of people don't have time to think about these things.
I think
Yeah.
they like to
Yeah.
keep it that way.
They don't have time.
But I think that, our justice, the judges, there's a lot of people who are reflecting on this issue, and I'm thankful for that. That gives me such a deep hope to think
awesome.
about all these people in the world that these what do you call them? These judges. There's people, they put themselves in the line of fire. They stuck their necks out, and for the rest of their lives, there's going to be a lot of people that look at them and say, you are basically, they hate, so much hate for them.
They're posting their addresses online like
yeah,
crazy. Like it's just
Purely.
awful.
And but they must have known these are smart people.
Some John
So, like, I
Gotti stuff.
admire those guys. Yeah, the
And
will,
in today's time
the
too, like
fierceness of their will to
under
say
Biden.
this is the right thing. They sacrificed their lives in a huge way.
They did, and there's a lot of Christians out there, and a lot of people going, it's the end of the end times and all this. And I'm not here to judge whether it is or not. I mean, they thought it was the end days were coming right after Paul, and they were talking about this stuff's happening right now. I mean, they had Caligula going up and just murdering Christians. They had a lot of signs of the times that were pretty much insane, worse than we have right now. But I love the fact that we have this we have something amazing happening in this time, a powerful, good move in the right direction.
yeah.
And
I don't think
that's-
anyone would have thought that would have happened.
No.
Yeah, to be honest with you, when I was sitting there thinking about it, in my bed, I didn't have high hopes. I was surprised. I'll tell you how I knew what I thought when you sent me the thing. It was like a news article. I was like, oh dang, we lost. That was my immediate feeling. I was like,
read it.
didn't even read it, just saw it, and it said overturned. So I didn't really connect what that meant. But it was my initial feeling. And I had to sit there. I was like, dang, wow. I finally got showed
one
up
for the team,
I
dude.
I was like, I got shocked a little bit.
You're like Michael Scott when I think Kevin, his cancer screening came back negative, and he thought that meant it was just a negative result, so he went to hug him.
That's exactly the way like you could have just said the exact, it's so brutal, dude.
It's kind of great though. It's like,
But it tells you
I died, but now I'm back.
But it tells you exactly where you're at.
Yeah, it's just
does,
in today's
you know?
society, you're like, this is the last thing that's ever going to change. Like, the last thing.
It's darkest before the dawn.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to keep
definitely
fighting. You got to keep fighting. We got to keep believing. Like Christ said, pray that this does not come to pass.
Yeah,
These
and
end
that's
times
why
do not come to pass.
we were
Pray.
talking about churches and like their boldness on this. There's a lot of churches that they had church, like from a church standpoint, you just had your biggest event in modern history, and they're not even talking about it. And it's like
crazy.
Like, how are you not cheering like right now? Like, how is this not even talked about like last Sunday in your sermon? Like, this is one of the biggest events in modern history.
Cause to rejoice.
And then so you got a lot of people still like, I don't want to rock the boat, and like I need to fit in, and that's just not, that's being lukewarm in my view.
I agree. Jesus, we're getting into Matthew 12, right? This is where the tide turns for him. It's not like Jesus could stand there or stay with the Jews trying to convince them. I mean, it ran its course, and then it was like the tide has turned. And then he went from people being interested, just liking being fed and given miracles and being taken care of by him. It's like, make your choice. And then people started getting mad, and I struggle with that sometimes because I'm a believer that's like, walk your walk, let your walk define who you are, and the people will come, because Christ is the most attractive thing in the world. But there does come a time to speak what Christ puts in your heart, and you have to stand in the midst of what comes back at you. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be persecution. And you have to be able to speak the truth, and you have to be able to rejoice. Like, come on, guys. This is a time to rejoice.
Yeah.
These are potential brothers and sisters that you're going to have a chance to celebrate life with in heaven. They now can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, think about the issue we're rejoicing on. We're rejoicing about our family.
That's what everyone thinks about, but I think like all the other sub issues, like we were talking about consequences and technology and how consequences make actions worth more, they're more valuable because there are consequences. You eliminate consequences, you diminish the value of the action. You literally diminish it. So I'm looking forward to, young people and taking sex more seriously, where they're really selecting a mate, not being so obtuse with who they allow to procreate with, whether they're Christians or not. It's a basic principle of being selective with who you're choosing. And then also the other means that come along with that, all the other things. Maybe families start more, maybe there's all these other things besides the lives of these
people.
Fetuses.
Don't have to agree with the truth in order for the truth to affect that individual positively. And that's why we as Christians have this amazing power. It's like Uncle Jimmy said, you got the truth on your side. You got the truth on your side. You got nothing to worry about. So those people, those kids, they're going to be affected by this legislation in a positive way. It can't help but be that way, because the truth will affect them whether they like it or not. And that's the beauty about Christ's law.
And I think this is one of the areas too where we have to hold Christians accountable. The ones that are trying to play both sides, the ones that are not, the progressive Christians, the ones not willing to take a stand on it. I think this is one of the situations
Let's talk
where
to those guys now, Mike.
Well, who are they, and what is what do you define as not taking a stand? Because we have the grape, and we also have the incest. Yeah. And I personally think like that those are some really hard. I'm not here to judge those situations, and I would never want to. I'm not going to draw a line in the sand on those. And there are also other pregnancies that, like tubule pregnancies.
That's a different subject.
I'm just saying there are there are abortions being a blanket term is not a fair assessment of whether they should be legal or not.
Well, we went into the statistics for that very reason. Because,
I agree. I just wanted to point that out.
We started off, Mike started off with that because we're trying to allow that. I'm
being redundant.
Yeah,
I just
it's
to
cool.
add it in.
But I do think because we're getting to the end here, and I think we should talk about our brothers and sisters that are misstepping in their faith. And I think you bring up a good point. Let's take this time to talk about those people, the progressive side of our faith, and the damage that they're doing to themselves in their walk.
Yeah, well, I think they gotta look at what the truth is. Like, you can't bend. This is just one issue that progressive Christianity gets into, whether it's the LGBTQ community, sex before marriage, like all these different issues that they're like held not existing. Like, they're just you can't be molding the Bible to what you want it to do for culture's sake. And they have no excuse on being, I would say, pro-choice today. There's zero excuse as a Christian, I think. And so they need to own that and I've gotten in arguments with some on it, and they come up with the most ridiculous excuses. It's like more people die from poverty than abortions every year, so you're mad about abortions? Like, why aren't you fighting poverty? And it's like just straw man argument after straw man. Another time I got asked, well, how many kids are you going to adopt? That was the rebuttal to me being against abortion from a Christian. And I'm like, this is not that's not how this works.
That's a cheap shot.
It means absolutely nothing. So I think it's just one example of them trying to fit into culture, and we are called to look different from culture. Like, we are going to be persecuted. We are supposed to look different from the world today in our opinions and our morals. And
that's right.
I think it's just not an acceptable stance to take, biblically, logically. Like, it's just full of so many holes to say you're pro-choice as a Christian today. I think I agree. It's not acceptable.
I don't think those people are opening their Bibles. And my question to you guys is, if you're not paying attention to the full document of the Bible, you're not appreciating it as God's word, then what is telling you to choose and decide on the issues? Is it just a general feeling? And these are the feelings, these are the statements of your faith that people are hearing. And so we, as Mike said, we are here to stand in the face of opposition and stand for truth. And that's going to mean our truth comes from somewhere. It's not something I think up. God is not a person that I am creating. This is a person I'm getting to know, and he's telling me who he is. And that's not up for debate. And so we have to pay attention to who he said he is, and that's in the Word. So I urge you to ask yourself the resources of who's defining God for you, because that's not something that's up for debate. You have to be able to hold yourself accountable to your faith, because being a Christian, these men sitting around this table, we're flawed men. We're nowhere near Christ. We're nowhere near Peter. It's not about a game of hierarchy of perfection. We call ourselves Christians because we desire to know God. We want to know who Christ is, and we want to be near him. We want to be close with him. We want to please him. And so that desire is what drives us, and we're not trying to make him anything else than what he is, because then we're getting to know deception. We're getting to know Satan. We're getting to know the opposite of what our desires are.
Well, let's be clear. There's nothing about abortion in the New Testament, and there's nothing really about it in the Old Testament. There's a small talk about if a man causes a woman to miscarriage, what they do.
You need to read between
that.
You need to read between the lines.
I'm just saying.
Jesus,
they pay money for it, is what they did in the Old Testament. And that was not an abortion. That was a miscarriage that was spurned by someone else.
Let me get this straight, Joe. Are you positing that the Bible doesn't say, because abortion wasn't a term that was around back then, I don't think, but it talks about the sanctity and sovereignty of life,
and how God knew you in your mother's womb before you're even in the womb.
Yep,
He made you destined. That soul is a soul in the womb.
Yep.
And so
you're a
there's no
person
question.
before your carnality exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then they're cutting them loose to heaven, right? So
That's not up to us, though. Again, you're playing God at that point. That's why murder is murder. So we need to read between the lines. There's so many things that we have to defer to principle on when trying to use this document as a guide.
okay.
We cannot use this document for, and I wish, divorce is a serious issue, and there is not delineated a perfect course of action for each and every case of divorce. Why is that?
Well, I'm just
Because-
saying
and I
the
wanna-
divorce is taken on several times, and it's
still
it's
not
a subject
covered
within the Bible.
completely, and that's why it has an issue.
I'm just saying abortion isn't mentioned pretty much at all. So that's all I was saying by that. I'm
Murder
not trying
is.
to elaborate any further than that. I'm saying, yeah, I agree with you. But where does so if you're pro-life, or say, you're pro-life, when you're saying that Christians should not have any pro-choice at all. So like if someone got raped, or if there was raped or incest or any of that, nothing.
To be
None of
logically
it.
consistent, that is a human life, regardless of how it was created. So yes.
and furthermore, an innocent human life, and that's what I grappled with a lot.
So even incest, where there's a high likelihood of that thing being, well, the child or the innocent life having a deformed, horrible life existence. Even in that case,
I would say these are such edge cases.
that's why I'm bringing it up, because the rest of them, I think those we've dealt with, and I think those are pro-choice or pro-life there's a no-brainer.
I think to be logically consistent,
as a blanket term, that's why I bring it up.
to be logically consistent, I think every human life is a soul created by God. So however it's created is kind of irrelevant. Now, because you could ask the same question about incest with, what if you do a scan of your baby in the womb halfway through pregnancy and find out it's going to have some sort of deformity or Down syndrome? Is that an acceptable abortion then, regardless of incest?
The Spartans would throw that thing off a cliff.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
there's
know.
also the Native Americans and several other cultures considered them, they actually value them in a high way. So, I mean, culturally speaking, it's split. I am not the person that's going to say one way or another determined, like for me, if I had a kid and the doctor said, he's got if it was like a life-threatening disease, like where he wouldn't, like my fiance's sister.
I'm not condoning that by the Spartan.
I
talk.
understand
I'm just saying,
that, dude. I understand that.
I
know you
understand the
better than that.
logic behind
But
it. Is all I'm
For
saying.
sure, like you don't want the kid to suffer. A lot of people would
Yeah,
say that.
of
Like, I
course.
just don't want this kid to leave a suffer-filled life. She had a kid that had a really sweet kid. He's still alive, but he almost died. He had SIDS, sudden
Infant death.
Yeah, and they misdiagnosed it, so he got sick, and man, that she had to deal with all kinds of just trials, bro, like deep trials, crazy stuff. And she's telling me all these mothers who lose their kids because of this, and I'm telling you, like, I think she loves her son so much, and I don't know how to. I don't know how it feels to love your own kid, but if you were in that position, I don't know how different it would be for you to say, like, yeah, he's got a disease or he may die. Like, I don't know. I'd probably do anything and everything in my power to make that kid live. Mr. Woodpecker out there.
Yeah.
Green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
But
right.
I did want to point something out, though, to Joe about the progressive Christians.
'Cause you
There's several issues with the progressive movement, like Mike had brought up. There's
LGBTQ, you brought that one up.
there's hell, in the Bible. There's all these just
They have to do with
unsavory,
judgment
bitter
and
things.
condemning.
Well, it's
They're
just
generally like
the
life decisions that are like,
they want to
you're
make
going to hell.
they want to make God a Santa Claus, like feeding kids sweets, than like God that's like, you need pain and suffering to grow to be turning into a creature I can relate to, right? Like, we all know that. That's why we love people who actually do things with their life that need discipline and prolonged focus. Like, a writer, any kind of technician that's become an artist because of his immersion in the subject matter he's decided to pursue. We admire that. And that's why we call ourselves the Iron Disciples. So with that in mind, when you strike all the, admonishment parts out of God and you start tooling him up to be something that he's not, the idolatry that's there, which is really what it is you're making your own God to worship, but you're saying, I like Jesus the most. So I'm going to kind of take him as my template, but we're going to take this out and take this out and take this out. That's what we're talking about as the progressives, and trying to remind them that the Bible, that Jesus, is a Jesus you can't define. He's the Jesus. He's a living, breathing, but he's the one person that transcends all personage. He's the most specific person. There's only one. So to remind them that is not something that's up for debate, because we have a spineless church in the United States, unfortunately, in many ways. And the ones that do have a spine sometimes are just asleep, you know, and so we have an issue with church.
There's a fine
That's
line.
why I wanted
between...
Mike to sort of address them a little bit.
I think
you know?
it's good.
That's
I think there's like, what was that one Baptist church, man, that like had the posters on the side for like the LGBTQ, like, you guys are going to hell. They were like,
Westboro Baptist.
Okay,
Westboro Baptist. They got like a bunch. I remember it was like, that's the Christians' land. It was so many people just pigeonholed every Christian due to those assholes, and it's that I feel like has a lot to do with a lot of the progressiveness of like what's going on. I have a lot of friends that are gay, and they're great people, and they're some of the sweetest people, period. Sensitive, they actually listen to you, beautiful people, and I love them. And I'm not here to like judge them, but like, hey, dude, you're going to hell because of your sexual what you've decided to do.
You're not,
but that's not my job.
Right.
That's Christ's job. That's God's job. I'm here to love them and to listen.
So you have the progressive Christians that are wrong, and then you also have these Christians trying to take on God's job, like those people in Texas.
Condemning.
They're both really wrong.
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be a fine line in between, because most of them already know that. They're looking for some type of like humanity behind it, some type of Christ loving, washing feet, doing something that's like for them, taking them in as a human being. And I think that's what's most of the time needed, because at the end of the day, it's like the sexual, for the LGBTQ thing, the question of whether that falls in line biblically or not, it's not the question. It's whether do Christians love them and accept them as human beings or not. And I think that becomes the defining line for a lot of people.
And I would say 90% of the brothers and sisters I know, they have gay friends and they love them.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't say
to even like the Christian, let's say back to that pro-choice thing, talking to Christians about that. That's our job, is to hold other Christians accountable. We're not here to go condemn some guy who's not a Christian that's living a lifestyle that we don't agree with. That's not our job at all. And that's the other thing we should bring up is,
great point,
for those, let's just say, or for those women that have gone through an abortion, like, we're not here to condemn you.
Exactly.
No, we're not here to condemn you. And we are here to we're here to love you, number one.
Yes.
And we're here to hold us fellow Christians accountable, number two.
Yes.
And it's not our job to put our moral views on non-believers.
Yes.
We can have opinions on how law should be laid out, and we obviously don't want like murder to happen, and so we're going to voice our opinions on that, but we're not personally morally judging your decision on that. Does that make sense?
That's so
that's
important.
what it is.
I think that's
I wanted to bring up the verse.
Important.
I want to posit the verse that describes that, and unfortunately, it's a really commonly misinterpreted verse. So what Mike described was the difference of the way a person of faith who believes in Christ handles these different people. You have saved people who are your brothers and sisters in Christ. Then you have people of the world who don't have salvation yet. You love both equally, obviously, but you're not judging. One you cannot judge. And so Jesus describes he says, do not cast your pearls before swine. Now, the reason why this is misinterpreted so often is because people will take the pearls and say, like, well, that's your, thing of value, and don't waste it on somebody who doesn't care about what you're saying. It's not entirely not true, but what he was saying was that a swine back in those days was the Jews used to use animals. Like if you're going to insult somebody, they didn't really have like all the different, cuss words we have to describe a person that we want to insult. They used animals. Like you're a dog, you're a pig.
Well, that was pretty much anyone that wasn't a Jew was considered a dog and a pig. Jews were God's people. Everyone else was dogs and pigs.
Well, it doesn't say that explicitly that was Jewish culture. The Bible does not say that. As a matter of fact, I'm reading in Leviticus, and it says if a sojourner or somebody outside, they are meant to be treated exactly like you. So that is not a biblical opinion of Gentile. However, the Jews did start to bring that upon themselves, and it was the reason why they fell, in my opinion, was because of their misinterpretation of God's law. Back to the swine and the pearls. What Jesus was saying was, do not put this method of living, this law, the judgment in our cases, like you're gay, you shouldn't be gay, or, you're a bad person because you're gay. Well, if they're not a believer, you don't push that on them. You don't dress, what Jesus was trying to say is you don't put your morality and ethics on a pig. Somebody who's not ascribed to them. They haven't made that covenant yet.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. They haven't made that covenant. They haven't made that deal, that promise. So how can you do that? So that's what that verse is saying.
Right.
And I just wanted to underscore what you were saying with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. One thing before we end, I know we're running out of time. For you young Christian guys out there and you young Christian girls out there, I brought up I think it was a small bit of, I didn't really elaborate on it. I would like to elaborate a little bit about the male's responsibility over his seed. It's your seed. Be responsible with that. And you can. There's literature that's written on this. The Taoist Chinese guys, they've worked really hard on this, and they have some techniques that you guys can implement. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but it certainly will get you in tune, and it will help you understand the ongoings of your own body and how to control them, the little muscles, sensations, instead of it being this sort of out-of-body experience that you're not in control of. It's not the way that it is. It's not an unconscious thing that's going on. Yes, your body is made to work a certain way, and we all know this, but through discipline and through habit and through practice, you can start to attune it differently and start to control it differently. So I encourage you guys to do that. If you aren't married and you don't want to have kids and you don't like using condoms, you don't want your wife on birth control, there's other ways to do it besides just not having sex or hoping for the best before an ovulation period or before a period, to do these types of stuff. There's information out there. Get into it.
Cool. How much time do we have, Mike?
You got anything else?
I wanted to say a quote.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
You got time.
This is a human rights quote. So old Abe Lincoln, he fought a really wonderful battle to liberate the black people from slavery. And it wasn't only liberating the black people from slavery, he was liberating a great portion of the white population from a flawed sense of human liberty, which in many ways was the bigger accomplishment, because those black people, the people who were subjugated by slavery, in many ways were more free than those white people, because they didn't have that restriction. They didn't have those human, they were not polluted by that sense of, by that
deception.
Disease of, by that deception.
Yeah.
By that disease of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Unequal equality.
Inequality, but there's a better word. Really. Racism. Thank you.
That's what it is.
Discrimination. So, old Abe Lincoln says, you say A is white and B is black. It is color then. The lighter having the right to enslave the darker? Take care. By this rule you are to be a slave to the first man you meet with a fairer skin than your own. Do you not mean color exactly? You mean that whites are intellectually the superiors of the blacks, and therefore have you the right to enslave them? Take care again. By this rule, you are to be a slave to the first man you meet with an intellect superior to your own. Abraham Lincoln.
So I think we're enslaved to these technologies and these lack of consequences that are occurring, because it's like these things aren't helping people.
Hedonism.
It's hedonism. We're not making lives better. And this goes into the food. This goes into so many other parts of our lives where we find pleasure or we find pain, and that middle ground in between it, because God wants both. He definitely doesn't want a whole life filled with dopamine.
Right.
You know, you can just imagine going to the casinos and just clicking the buttons all the time. I watched this movie just quickly to end it up. They had these little drug packs on their back, and they could attune them to like help them talk better or find the other person sexually attractive, or, you know, go to sleep. These types of things, they could just trigger them immediately without the work that it takes to inspire intimacy, the work that it takes to inspire, you know, a tired mind. You know, when you're dealing with anxiety, you have to battle those demons. You have to find those questions, those answers, until your brain can say, oh, I can chill out right now. That's what it would end up being like. We'd just be pressing the buttons and going through, and then pretty soon, what does that leave us with? You know, that's not a life.
Nothing to
There's
strive
no
for.
living going on. Yeah.
It's not an echo.
Nothing to strive for. That's right.
We love to strive.
Consequences are good. Pain is good.
Amen.
Indeed. Well,
Amen.
amen to that. Should we close in prayer?
Yes.
Yes, we didn't
believe
open up
so.
in prayer today either.
We didn't. We
No,
got to
we
say a
didn't.
double long prayer today.
Do an open and a close.
Well, let's
Oh, man.
go for it, John.
Okay, well, Lord, sorry for not remembering our prayer in the beginning. Thank you for your grace. You know, Lord, we know that nothing we do, reading our Bibles or praying, is some kind of a duty. We're meant to enjoy these things. We're meant to take these things as food and have them edify our spirit and our mind. And we thank you for this amazing victory we have had in the United States, saving these beautiful lives, having a hand in your preservation of these lives, how you've stitched them together with loving hands before they came into their carnal being. We see your beautiful thoughtfulness, your care, and your attention to detail, and hopefully these people in the United States, our brothers and sisters here, will continue to treat that life with the utmost respect, and we thank you for a step in that right direction. We know it happened because of you, and we know it was something that was within your will, and so we celebrate and we magnify your will and the amazing victory that it is. Thank you, Lord. We thank you for these men here today. We pray specifically for those women, Father, that have dealt with abortion in one form or another. We pray healing in their lives, that they will find you, Lord, find your grace, your mercy, and the young men, the families that have been damaged by abortion. And we pray for the younger generation, that they will have that understanding of how important sex is, and that we're creating new human life, and that there's nothing more important than that, and that this will be something, some seeds of thoughtfulness will be planted deeply within the next generation, so that we can be better stewards, Lord. We thank you for this day and these men, and we worship you. We love you, Lord, in your amazing name, Father. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.